If you were a kid in the late 1980s, you probably played this game. Blades of Steel on the NES is an all-time classic. It was more than just a hockey game, too. It featured a great fighting system. And it really was a classic. Okay, so maybe it wasn't like a great and unforgettable hockey game. It's not quite like, NHL 94 or something like that. Sure, I'll give you that. But Blades of Steel really was a great game for its time. And the history behind it is actually pretty interesting. Believe it or not, Blades of Steel actually started off life as an arcade game. That's right, Konami made arcade games long before classic games like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, even if you don't remember them. If you're my age, you probably remember spending quarters in games like The Simpsons, another Konami classic from the early 1990s. And there was also this X-Men arcade game, which is another great classic from the second golden age of arcade gaming. Well, unfortunately, Blades of Steel came out in the arcades right before Konami's golden age, the second golden age of arcade games. It's not a bad game, but man, it would have been so much better if they could have waited to put this one out until they had that technology they were using in 1991 and 1992. Anyway, I don't think too many people have played this, even though it's a Konami arcade game. Now, Blades of Steel is kind of unusual because of its vertical aspect ratio. It's almost like you're playing a YouTube short.
Blades of Steel.
It's a pretty good game for 1987, I guess.
He's going down to make the save. CPU.
And you'll notice similarities with the NES Classic right from the start.
Perfect shot. From the face-off.
Now, of course, this wasn't Konami's first arcade game, not even close, but it's still interesting that this game came out at all. Konami was kind of slowly pushing towards sports arcade games in the mid-1980s, and the company was experimenting with different approaches to gameplay. In the beginning, there was this 1984 game called Super Basketball. It's not really a full basketball game, you just try to score points against the computer defense. The game does have computerized voices, which is similar to Blades of Steel. Overall, though, this game is pretty lame. But notice that it used the same vertical orientation as Blades of Steel. So that game, Super Basketball, came out back in 1984. By 1986, Konami had made a couple of adjustments, and so its next arcade sports game was a game that you might have heard of. This is called Double Dribble. This game has voices similar to Super Basketball and kind of looks like the NES version, though it's a lot different. It's got the same cutscenes, which is pretty cool. But this game is really frustrating, and it eats quarters like it's going out of style. In particular, you're forced to push the dribble button while you play in order to dribble, which makes this a really, really frustrating game. Anyway, the most memorable part of this game is the computer singing the United States national anthem completely out of tune. Now, there's a reason why people don't talk much about the arcade version of Double Dribble these days, unless you're really strange like me. I mean, the gameplay is not really that great, and the computerized voice is, kind of is what it is. Anyway, at least that game had a normal-looking screen. But for whatever reason, Konami went back to the vertically oriented screen for Blades of Steel, and I really don't understand it. Like, maybe they had a bunch of those things like sitting around or something? I don't know. This game plays basically the same as the NES version.
He's out for 30 seconds. Shot goes wide.
Of course, the voices in this game sound a lot better than Double Dribble.
Bruising check. Get the pass.
And you can hear the announcer clearly say, "Get the pass," when you pass it. Scoring a goal gives you a 30-second time bonus, which is nice. So that bonus for a goal is actually really important because this is one of those games that hogs all of your quarters. Konami was ruthless about this back in the day and of course made a lot of money as a result. Like in this game, a single quarter gets you like a minute of playtime, and it took me like 20 minutes real time just to play a single game. I mean, it's crazy. Of course, the best part of this game isn't passing or shooting. It's fighting.
Fight! They're going at each other. Hey! Pretty face! Hey! Your brain damage! Kick his butt! He's got me! Oh! Alright! Oh!
Like the NES game, the guy who loses the fight gets dragged off the ice and thrown into the penalty box.
H-I-C.
And this game is simply awesome because of those fight scenes. The meme potential here is off the charts. I mean, you go around your friends and you scream, "Hey, you're brain damage," over and over again, right? The only problem is that the fighting happens pretty frequently.
Fight! They're going at each other. Come on, you chump! Hey! Your brain damage! He's at me!
It can kind of slow your game down to get these fights in constantly.
Oh, come on! H-I-C. Teams takes the puck. C-P-U. Needs first aid. He's out for 30 seconds.
Underneath all of that, of course, you've got a game that is pretty much the same as the NES version.
Ruse and check. Fight!
Again, the only strange thing is the vertical orientation, which seems really ill-thought. The controls used a trackpad, which is interesting, and had buttons on the left and right sides for left and right-handed players. And the arcade flyer was interesting, to say the least. Now, it's really not all that easy for us these days to figure out how popular this game was in the arcades back then. Remember, arcade games in 1987 were not really hugely popular. This isn't like 1982, and it's before Street Fighter II came out. The only real way to figure out how many people were playing or who was playing anything is to track down old issues of magazines like Replay, which was like an industry magazine. It's not that easy to find. However, I was able to find a couple of references to this arcade game in old newspapers, which is at least a sign that the game was somewhat popular. The Chicago Tribune featured it in an article about the best arcade games back in 1987. It was listed among the likes of Double Dragon, the original Street Fighter, and Afterburner. Blades of Steel was the only one to feature a photo, and it includes a vague description of the fights. The Calgary Herald also mentioned the game briefly in this article about athletes playing video games during the 1988 Winter Olympics. They said Blades of Steel was the game of choice among the Olympic athletes. And I'm guessing whoever owned the arcade there at the University of Calgary made a fortune off of the quarters of these Olympic athletes. Anyway, the arcade game was not bad, but you likely don't remember the arcade version that much. After all, it was the NES version that got all the attention, right? Well, the NES version originated in Japan, but it wasn't a cartridge. This was one of those Famicom Disk System games. As you probably know, the Famicom Disk System was an add-on that fit right under the Famicom, which was the Japanese version of the NES. It took discs that looked just like this. So you would stick your disc in the machine like this. When you turn the machine on, you'd get a message like this one. And then you had to eject the disc and turn it over to side B. So that's the biggest problem with the FDS. It was designed to be the way that it is because there was only so much space you could stick on a cartridge ROM back in 1986. So the idea was to make it so companies could make bigger games and also so that they could sell the games for cheaper, because you just went to like this computer over at the store and you paid the equivalent of like $10 or something and you got the new game copied onto your old disc. The problem, though, is that this system had all of these crazy wait times and crazy load times. Konami Hockey's not that bad for it, but some of the other games are really awful. Plus, it only took a couple of months for the technology for cartridge-based ROMs to improve so that you could fit games on the cartridges that were bigger than the FDS discs. Anyway, once you got it to run, you finally got to the title screen. This game was called Konami Ice Hockey, and don't ask me what in the world Konami is supposed to mean. So Wikipedia tells me that the name Konami is a portmanteau, or a combination of the names of the three founders of the company, which means that the adjective Konamic means absolutely nothing. This game helpfully tells you that it uses both the A and B sides of the disc, though I'm not sure when you're supposed to go back to the A side. Anyway, you push start, you select the mode, and you select your teams. And then you wait. Man, I tell you, we had a lot of patience back in the 1980s. You kids these days, you don't even know. Anyway, the game finally loads like 5 minutes later, and then you've got Blades of Steel. It's exactly the same as the US version, except there's no fighting. You can punch each other out, but there's no fight screen. So maybe they censored it or something? I really don't know. Honestly, though, my guess is that they probably didn't put the fighting in because there wasn't enough room on the FDS disc, and so it got left on the cutting room floor. But I don't have any source for that, sorry about that. Anyway, the interesting thing about Konami Ice Hockey is that it reminds me a lot of an earlier Famicom Disk System hockey game. That would be Ice Hockey, another 1988 hockey game on the Famicom Disk System, but one that was created directly by Nintendo. Of course, the difference is that you can choose the size of your players in ice hockey. Gameplay is similar, though ice hockey looks more cartoonish. And it's actually got more replay value because of the different size players. If you haven't played this game yet, you really need to play it. It's one of the all-time classic NES games. Now, here's where things become kind of interesting. Blades of Steel on the arcade came out first, right? This is October 1987. It's clearly the first game of this style. Ice Hockey by Nintendo feels very, very similar. It has that thing with the arrow that goes up and down for the goalie and all that stuff, whatever you call it. Now, Nintendo's game came out in Japan in January 1988. I've got to wonder if that game wasn't somehow inspired by Blades of Steel. Bi-Weekly Famitsu, Japan's biggest video game magazine at that time, didn't say anything about the Blades of Steel arcade game in 1987, but then again, the magazine was focused on home console gaming and hockey wasn't that big in Japan anyway. I mean, there was hockey in Japan in the late 1980s, though I really don't know how many people actually cared about this sport. Japan certainly has never been known as a hockey power, that's for sure. Anyway, Ice Hockey in the Famicom Disk System did get a quick review in the February 5th, 1988 issue of Famitsu, and you've got to love the cover of this thing. The game didn't get the best ratings in the world, but these ratings are actually still okay, so you've got to remember that the Famitsu staff was notoriously stingy with the numbers. And there was also this 2-page in-depth review of the game, which kind of seems like overkill when you consider the kind of game that this was. But of course, the key here is that this is still a fun game. Now, Famitsu had a reputation for giving a ton of information about the games that the staff, actually liked playing. Meanwhile, there were tons and tons of games that got no attention at all. Sadly, Konami Hockey got that kind of treatment. All this game got was this brief capsule preview in the July 29th, 1988 issue. Now, I've been looking around these old issues of Famitsu magazine, that's what I do in my spare time, and yet I haven't been able to find any Japanese advertisements for Konami Hockey, despite the fact that it was made by Konami. I mean, that's weird. Konami was kind of a big company, especially in Japan, but even though this game doesn't seem to have been a big hit in Japan, it certainly was a big hit in North America. Blades of Steel made a huge impact when it was released in North America in December 1988. Everything about this game just felt epic, even the back of the box. And unlike Famitsu, Nintendo Power gave Blades of Steel a lengthy article in issue 3, which meant that Nintendo's advertising machine was completely behind this game. Of course, like the other early Nintendo Power articles, this one was a barely disguised 4-page advertisement for the game. I guess there's some token information about different team abilities for whatever that's worth, but most of the advice here, be sure to build up your lead and you cannot select your opponent in the tournament, really doesn't mean anything. And my biggest question is, are the teams in Blades of Steel on the NES really that different? I mean, I played this game all the time as a kid. I always thought the only difference was the colors of the uniforms. They all felt the same to me. I don't know, maybe it's just my imagination. You guys tell me. Anyway, Blades of Steel is a ton of fun to play even today. But there's only one problem with this game. You have to control your goalie at the same time as one of your other players. And that means you have to get used to focusing on the goalie when the other team is close to scoring. Now that's got to be the biggest problem with the 8-bit version of this game. Aside from that, I think that this game is almost perfect. It's a ton of fun to play. I just wish they would have given you the automatic goalie feature, that's all. But that's not all for this video, because there are other versions of Blades of Steel that I bet most of you have never played. For example, Blades of Steel came out for the Commodore Amiga back in 1990. The box and the information looks a lot like the NES version. I tried to play this on an Amiga emulator, but I couldn't get much further than selecting my team. I guess the preview of the game looks okay. Anyway, they also came out with a port on the MS-DOS in 1990.
Blades of Steel.
And that is what it is. You've got to use a number pad if you play. 0 is shoot and period is pass. It's kind of jerky and it's really not much fun without the controller. I guess you could probably get, one of these controllers to work, though I didn't mess around with it that much in DOSBox. Anyway, the problem with games like this is that the computer technology back in 1990 was a long way away from the consoles. Even though this is before the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis came out, it was still just far off. Now, oddly enough, I haven't even been able to find any pictures of the MS-DOS disc for this game. I've never seen it for sale on eBay. My guess is that it's pretty rare. Anyway, if you thought that was bad, just wait until you see the Game Boy version of this game. Oh boy. Yeah, they came out with Blades of Steel on the Game Boy, though this didn't come out until 1991. That was 3 years after the NES version had come out and 4 years after the original arcade game. A little bit late, don't you think? Anyway, this game would have been horrible to play on the original console. The screen keeps flipping out all over the place and I can never see where the puck is. I seriously think that this is the worst port of Blades of Steel, period. They didn't even get any of the sounds right. Yeah, okay, I know that the Game Boy did not have the same capabilities as the NES, and it's impressive that the game was as fast as it is, because usually Game Boy games are really, really slow, right? You sit there in your parents' car on the long car trip playing the Game Boy game till your batteries run out, and you've got nowhere to go, so you're okay, you just sit there and wait for the stupid thing to keep going. You know what I'm talking about? Anyway, was there even demand for Blades of Steel on the Game Boy in 1991? I really doubt it. Anyway, that was it for Blades of Steel until the series suddenly came back in 1999. There were 2 versions of Blades of Steel on the Game Boy Color, and both had the NHL and NHLPA licenses. Both games are almost identical to the Game Boy game, except that they're in color. I found these games really frustrating to play. Different players have different speeds and abilities, sure. But you still have to control your own goalie when you're controlling a defender. And the screen keeps flipping out all over the place. Scoring a goal leads directly to a cutscene. In fact, it's so quick that you're surprised to realize that the puck went over the line. And then there are really strange things like these cutscenes in between periods. So the Game Boy version is clearly the worst version of this game, but the Game Boy Color versions are up there with the Game Boy version in terms of crappiness. Fortunately, however, there were also 2 versions of NHL Blades of Steel for the advanced consoles of that time. These games are actually pretty good, even though the reviews for them were not so good. So let's start off with the N64 version. NHL Blades of Steel 99 came out on the N64 in April 1999, and this game was simply fantastic. This one feels more like a 3D hockey game than anything close to the classic Blades of Steel. The announcer is fantastic though, and this game is a lot of fun to play. The play control isn't great, however, and it can be hard to figure out how to make your player, go forward. And there's this annoying thing where the game will change the guy you control on defense, out of nowhere. But overall, this is actually a really good hockey game. I'm honestly amazed that more people don't talk about this one. Actually, the reason why people have overlooked this game is really simple. It just didn't get good ratings back in the day. And it's amazing how quickly a game's reputation can be made. Nintendo Power spent 6 pages detailing all the modes and options in this game. And there's a lot of these tactical choices you can make. I haven't even begun to dig into all this. This game was not slapped together the way those Game Boy Color carts were. This one clearly had a lot of hard work and thought put into it. But the overall ratings were very poor, especially the ratings for things like satisfaction. And of course, the reviewers cited the awkward controls as a major problem. Anyway, I don't know, maybe I haven't played this game enough. Like maybe if I sit down and play it a whole bunch, I'll change my tune and say, nah, this game sucks, don't play it or something. All I know though is that when I played it, I actually had a lot of fun. It was actually, very enjoyable. I'd love to play it again. I really think this game might be a sleeper. It's one of those hidden gems. Anyway, there was a follow-up the next year, but only on the PlayStation, not on the N64. NHL Blades of Steel 2000 on the PlayStation wound up being the final version of Blades of Steel. The graphics are a lot uglier than the N64 version. However, the gameplay here is also pretty good. As some people in the comments have told me, this game seems more focused on like center ice and the neutral zone and less focused on the attacking zones. Even though I didn't fully figure out the controls, it wasn't too hard to figure out what I was supposed to do without even looking at the manual. In fact, this one feels a lot easier to play and control than the N64 game.
Number 4, New York Islanders, setting up in the defensive zone.
And seriously, the graphics, they look really silly today, but given that this was a PlayStation 1 game, they're not really that bad. Remember, the technology was a lot further behind, right? Now, if this was for the PlayStation 2, you'd be like, man, that's a piece of crap. But for the PlayStation 1, I mean, those like polygons and that kind of weird blocky look was normal. Everyone was doing it. This isn't as bad as it looks. Anyway, the official PlayStation magazine gave it a little blurb near the back of this issue. It's a pretty bad review, and it highlights things like shallow figures and bad presentation. You'll notice that they recommend playing NHL Face-Off 2000 instead, which of course was a game published directly by Sony. Yeah, you know that attitude. Screw those Konami guys, buy our game instead. Yeah, interesting advertising strategy. Anyway, I haven't played NHL Face-Off 2000 yet, so I can't tell you like if they're lying about that or not. I will play it though before long, so stick around on this channel. And by the way, while you're at it, if you like the stuff I do, think about becoming a channel member, or you can go check out my Patreon and support me there so I can play more of these games for you. Anyway, that's the legacy of Blades of Steel. There wasn't anything after the PlayStation game, and the series kind of died off. But the NES cartridge is still an all-time classic. And honestly, I would really like to see somebody do a remake of this arcade original. Anyway, Blades of Steel might not be the legendary game that it was back when you and I were kids, but it still is a lot of fun. It's worth picking up again today. It still is a ton of fun, especially as a two-player game. So, if you've got like a Sunday or something, screw the Super Bowl, man. Give Blades of Steel a try.